p.m. and I call to order this meeting of the Middlebury Development Review Board for July 22nd, 2019. We have one business agenda item tonight. That's an application by C&P Brick and Mortar for a development of a new one-story, 6,900 square foot office building located at 383 Exchange Street. Approval of DRB minutes for 6/10/2019. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Discussion on the minutes, changes, comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I will abstain. Are there any public communications from anybody on any item not on the agenda tonight? Hearing none. We'll go to the first and only item. The application request by C&P Brick and Mortar LLC is an amendment to an existing plan unit development approved dated August 2nd, 2002 for the development of a new one-story, 6,900 square foot office building located at 383 Exchange Street. 383 Exchange Street is located in the general commercial district on parcel 21043-100. Okay. The following is the DRB oath. Applicants, interested persons, and those wishing to participate in this hearing. If you're interested in participating, please take the oath now. Do you affirm that the evidence and information you are giving in this proceeding is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief? Please signify by raising your hand.
I do.
At this time, I would ask the members of the board if any member has a conflict of interest regarding this application.
I do. I will recuse myself
Thank you.
for this discussion.
And then also at this time, does any member wish to disclose any ex parte conversations concerning this case? Okay. All right. Introduce yourself and briefly tell us what the project is.
Mr. Chair, before I pass it over to our architect for the project, who's going to fill you in on all the plans, give a little bit of context of the building. So we purchased the property to be our office space for Champlain Valley Equipment, and with the understanding that Sears was going to be there long term. When they declared bankruptcy and terminated their lease, we were fortunate enough to get a very good tenant in Beeswrap. We got Beeswrap at a time when they were growing and they needed more space to stay there. We were lucky enough to find office space down the street just a little bit in Windrunner Holdings building where the golf caddy shack is out back. So we occupy the front of that now. That's our corporate offices. As Beeswrap has been growing, the facility is adequate for their production, but they need some office space. And so they were looking at whether they would build or move out of town. They were looking at some spots up in Heinsberg, and I worked with the owner of Beeswrap and volunteered to, as we really don't use that storage shed that's there now. It's really underutilized, and for me, it's going to become an eyesore before too long. It's deteriorating, the building is. So we felt we could tear that down and put up an office building. And looking at the financial requirements to put up an office building, we couldn't do that in keeping the rent that a growing business needs to be without making it large enough and having a second tenant. And about at that time, Vita had expressed interest in the space that Beeswrap ended up running originally, so we worked with them. with the two of them, it makes a project. It brings Vita down where a lot of their business is, off from Exchange Street. And so that's kind of the context of the project, why we need to do it. We're trying to do it so that it provides an attractive appearance, but at the same time trying to keep it so that the rents are in line with what the government and a growing young business can afford. So with that, I'll pass it over to Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. My name is Chris Huston. I'm with Bellwether Architects. Brian retained us to design the building and walk through the various permitting regulatory agency processes. So what we'd like to do is fairly quickly walk through the project particulars. If I go up to the screen, will the audio work, or?
Sure, yes. Well, as long as you speak fairly loudly.
Okay, okay, I can do that. As Brian mentioned, the parcel is part of a PUD previously approved. We are requesting this evening an amendment to that PUD by placing the new roughly 6,900 square feet. It's a little bit under 6,900 square feet, but placing that building very intentionally right along the front yard setback, aligning it with Exchange Street was very important. That allowed us to have all of the parking behind the building that we'll talk about in just a moment. As Brian mentioned, trying to make sure that I'm not blocking your screen. There is an existing barn structure that's located sort of right in the middle of the property currently. There's an open grass lawn to the east of that barn structure that's going to be demolished. And then there's some sort of mixed parking and some gravel, some pavement, and so on. The existing vehicle access is truck access to the south of the property that existed is not going to change. That'll be perfect for deliveries to the back of the Beeswrap building. For orientation purposes, this is the old, formerly the Sears building that Brian just referred to a moment ago. The primary entry to the site off of Exchange Street really will not change at all. It's an existing curb cut. You'll see on our drawings, we've indicated that the future sidewalk project that is planned for sometime next year is also included. Well, it's indicated on our drawings, and we're recognizing that that will be a future amenity to this part of the of Exchange Street. In looking at in perhaps using your staff comments as a guide, all of our setbacks are met. Lot coverage is met, less than 40%. The access I just mentioned a moment ago. In terms of the outdoor lighting, we're proposing to have 4 new pole-mounted lights in the primary portion of the parking lot. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a 5th one to light the front of the site located right around this location. There will be some canopy lighting that is entirely concealed at the main entry, as well as at the 2 egress points from Beeswrap is the portion to the north of the building, and occupying this, including this this return gable that faces west as well, and then Vita occupies the southerly portion of the building. We do not have any wetlands, waterways, or conservation areas. In terms of landscaping and screening, what works really nicely on this property is that there's a row of fairly mature street trees that were planted when the original Sears building was built. There are 2 additional trees that we're going to add to sort of complete that row of street trees. But what it does is it provides a really nice scale and rhythm to this building that we're very purposefully, as I mentioned, placing it very closely to Exchange Street to create that, that street edge that is important in our opinion. I'll illustrate the building elevations in just a moment. Dave, could you just give that a little?
Sorry about that.
That's right. So as we mentioned, people are able to park to the north if they're using the sort of industrial functions of the BSRAP, the former Sears building. These functions are all going to be office related functions. So in terms of landscaping, we do have a number of interior trees for shading and so on, and those comply with your, as I understand, fairly recently revised zoning requirements. And then we will also plant around the building with pollinator, friendly plants, and also some screening trees, some shade trees, 4 of them, that will create an outdoor court. I don't know, Dave, if you can zoom in on that entry for just a moment, if that's easy. If not, no big deal.
Not without reducing the
Okay,
size of it,
that's
I don't
fine.
think.
You can't just wheel the.
I don't, maybe. No, because it's a PDF.
Okay, that's fine. We are creating an outdoor employee sort of lunch area and so on just outside of the main entry. Outdoor storage, trash and recycling and so on will occur at the back, the sort of loading dock area of the existing BSRAP building. There will be some screening of 2 compressors that are located both to the south and the north of the building. And those are only approximately 3 feet high. Stormwater and erosion control, we've actually taken a completely fresh look at the whole site. Because the whole site is part of a PUD, we're actually going to be treating the entire site through a series of surface catchment with pre-treatment that is going to be occurring through some green infrastructure that is utilizing these islands to sort of pre-treat before them being collected and ultimately being finally treated to the northwest. Will be, in that case, this is a new constructed gravel wetland. And when the original Sears building was built, the standards are they've changed. So consolidating the treatment on the whole site was something that was of value since we're redesigning the whole site. In terms of parking and traffic count, or the number of vehicles that are required by zoning is actually 78. We're showing currently 90, and this is something that came up in the design advisory committee review. And if possible, we discussed perhaps reducing the number of parking to that 78, or even perhaps to 80 as a round number, which may allow for 1 parking space for each of these structures. So that's something we'd like to discuss with you this evening. In terms of the water supply, there'll be a new water service to both the office building, and also due to sort of an older infrastructure which saw some repairs and things like that over the years, we're actually going to be rerouting the water to the other existing buildings. Sewer is going to be connected directly to the town infrastructure. There's previously a private on-site pump station. Now it'll be all gravity, which is also a nice improvement. In terms of, Dave, if we could look at the perspectives. We worked diligently to get the building to fit the context of what is ultimately a really important portion of Exchange Street. That this view is taken from the south looking north. Agway is sort of off to your, off to the right and so on. Right back here is the existing gable end of the Sears building. You would be entering the site just to the north. So Beeswrap would occupy the northern portion of the new building, and Vita the south. Each tenant has the primary main entry, but also a second means of egress. The materials are reflective of the nature of the character of this part of town, with a series of horizontal painted siding, vertical painted siding, and then mixing it up with some corrugated metal to break down the scale and also create this rhythm along Exchange Street, creating a metal roof with these shed dormers that sort of break up that roof line, asphalt shingles for the rest of the main portion of the building. Overall height is, in keeping with other single-story buildings along this area. Perhaps the north elevation or north perspective. This is the view looking from the north, heading south. So you're entering the site in this location. We have all of our parking behind the lead edge of the building, illustrating the future sidewalk that will be, we understand, installed next year. I think those are the primary aspects that we wanted to highlight to you. Obviously, further discussion. Any additional questions? Just looking. Yeah, it's probably a good stopping point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dave, could we go back to the site plan? Chris, I was there today, and
Yep.
there just happened to be a tractor trailer backing up to the back of Beeswax,
Yeah.
and they had no problem at all. I'm wondering with that green space on the northwest island there, no, down,
Oh, I'm sorry.
correct,
One of
the
these
one in the
two.
middle. The
Yeah.
fact that that is there, is that gonna inhibit at all the tractor trailer backing into that area?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that we looked at. They will still have the ability to drive in head first and then do a turn such as this and then back into the.
I was just
into the
thinking,
loading
if you've got more parking than you really
Right.
need, if you could
dock. Perhaps,
push that back towards
Right.
the east, it
Mhm.
may be easier
Yeah,
for
ease that,
tractor
yeah.
trailers. Okay.
yeah. We will be balancing, if we do, and we are, I believe, Brian, inclined to reduce the number of parking initially from a cost standpoint, but also from the fact that that would allow us to provide additional pretreatment for the stormwater and so on. We do have a sort of a lower catchment point right there for the stormwater, but that's something that we could definitely look at in terms of increasing the maneuverability of those vehicles.
Chris, I, took a look at the site as well, where the two other buildings that are existing, Woodland Woodworks and then the repair shop, there's greenery in the back. I believe that Woodland Woodworks is entered. There's a man door in the back. Is there any plan for parking for them? Are they going away, or how do those other two buildings, where does their parking come into play, and how does that all come
Sure.
together?
Yeah, it's a great question, John. They are, for the time being, they are going to remain. Ultimately, I think, Brian, that over time, they may.
Well, this is kind of how, so the building up to the east, that building,
Yeah,
we own that business now. so
Yep.
We control that.
sure.
And,
You need the microphone.
okay, so the building that Chris just pointed at, that's ours now, and we only have one employee there now.
Yep.
Actually, we have two, I'm sorry. There's one that's part-time there. And so they park right in front of the building. There's room there before the driveway.
Exactly.
And so the Woodland Woodworks, who I hope will remain a tenant for an extended period of time,
Sure.
he is much of the time off-site, but we could create it so that in asking him where to park, which could be kind of similar to the way our repair shop works. We could change where, right now, there's a big unmarked gravel yard, and they just pull in randomly.
Sure.
If we go with this expansion, we'll have to have designated parking spaces, which is very doable. And they could all be to the south side of those buildings.
Okay. That's all I'm asking. I don't,
Yeah.
whatever you do with those buildings is your business. I'm just wondering if they're set up for future parking and access and everything else.
Yeah, they're small shops, and so two to three vehicles a piece would be the maximum amount. And there's room between the shop and the driveway to park your vehicle.
There's so much about this project to love, and it's from the textbook of how you stitch back an industrial automotive area into something walkable, except that there's no connection to the sidewalk. Is a future connection to the sidewalk planned along the north side of the new building or somewhere?
Yeah, we've talked about that with the Design Advisory Committee and recommending that, and actually Jen had pointed it out previously. Because the sidewalk's not in there, that would be something that absolutely would go in later. But having something that connects that, because there's so many, my staff is anxious to have the sidewalk out on Exchange Street to walk at lunch break. And so getting them onto that sidewalk without running them through the road, through their driveways, it will be done. But finding that natural progress once that we have a sidewalk and can see where it fits.
Right. So the two condensers on the north side of the building aren't going to keep you from being able to do that between the landscape and the parking? You can still sneak by if you need to go there?
Yep. Well,
I mean, it's not that that's where you should put it.
Right.
It seemed natural. So.
Right. What we do, Dave, is we would have the sidewalk be tight to the curb, to the parking curb.
Yes, Ann?
To come back to parking for a minute, the two buildings to the south of the property, there's room between those buildings, you said, and Feed Mill Lane for parking spaces there, which aren't shown on here, right?
Correct.
Okay, because
That's where they park much of the time.
I saw that on Google Earth or whatever it is.
Okay.
There were cars parked there in the 2019 photos. My second question about parking is, do you know how many spaces there are now, including the ones on the grass where people park, which is where I parked, because that was the only place there was a space. In the grass on the south side of the Sears driveway.
Right on the edge of the road.
Yes.
There.
Just as a comparison between the 80 and 90 proposed.
Yep, I think I can count those up fairly quickly.
One thing that, apologize if you can't entirely see this existing plan,
Oh,
but essentially you have all the parking in front of the
Right.
current Sears building doesn't change. And then there is limited parking right here, as you indicated. It's parallel parking. And then it's a little bit sort of, it's unmarked, and some folks sort of park behind this existing, this is the
Yes.
barn that's going to be
oh
demolished.
yeah, I know, that looked
So-
like a big mess, but,
Right.
but there were some nicely lined up cars
We
too.
created parking so that it was, so there's like 24 spaces here, I
Uh-huh.
believe. And then we created some parallel parking, and then we created some more
Yes,
somewhat diagonal parking, and I think there's around 35 spaces there now
in total,
in total.
okay. Okay, thank you. I just wanted the comparison because it was extremely crowded.
It is.
But compared to 80 spaces, that's...
Right, and we aren't using that gravel space where you see the additional parking right now very well, because it's also, it has to have access, the current tenant who's using that shed has to have access to the shed. So when that goes away, then that allows us to repurpose all that space.
And I have a question about rainwater. Maybe I'm supposed to know this, but I get that the idea is that it all goes to the northwest eventually. How do you pre-treat runoff in those grassy areas south of that?
So what we're proposing is a series of drop curbs. So basically, we have curb to define the parking and collect it and sort of channel it.
So that's what pre-treat means?
Yes.
It doesn't mean anything chemical or biological?
It's
just rooting?
It's rooting, yeah, it's rooting it over a vegetated area to take the heavy sediment and some of the floatable sort of particles and things like that. And and this is we will be submitting this to the state for a stormwater permit. So they're the ones who really are going to look at all the calculations and so on very carefully. But it's a vast improvement really over what exists today, because we're actually going to be treating, as I mentioned, all of the existing impervious area, including the Sears building and the new buildings and the parking lot and so on.
No, that was just an educating me question on pre-treatment.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Another educational question. So Bees Wrap is there now. It's a production facility.
Yep.
And forgive me, I don't know because I'm just down the street, but do they do retail sales there as well? No.
No, and they have no intention.
That's elsewhere.
There, and it was just an article, I think it was on WCAX, that I read online, but it quoted how many stores they're in now, but it's significant. And Sarah has no intention of turning that into a factory store or
Brick and mortar, okay.
Right now, they can sell everything out retail by shipping it out of there and not have the issues of having people coming in. That creates a parking issue. It creates a lot of issues for them.
God bless them.
So
Good. Okay. Thanks for the education.
Other questions from the board at this time?
I have a question. Kevin, the tractor trailer entrance, when you watched the truck turn around, did they come in through by Sears, or had they come around the back way from Piedmont?
That I don't know, because it was just starting to
Is that
back.
why you pinched the entry off of the entry into the current parking? It looked like a fairly tight curb cut.
We actually did give it a little bit more definition. We shifted it just a little bit to make sure that we have the right sort of relationship with the parking. But essentially, it's our understanding that all deliveries understand and know that they're to use this. And I actually think that generally speaking, they're gonna prefer this in terms of its width and openness and visibility versus coming through a crowded through a parking lot.
Right, like for me, like outcome number one is you design the good access, they use it, and the primary access remains at the appropriate scale for the office. Outcome number two, not quite as good as you don't go where they don't go where you want you to, but it's designed at least to accommodate them. And the worst possible outcome is they end up going through the place that's not designed for them.
Sure.
So it's an operational as much as a design question. That's why I asked, and it sounds like you have a plan for it.
Yeah. The driveway is circular, so if they do come in the other, they can pull through and back up.
Right.
But because of all the vehicles Sarah has changed, they used to come in that more northerly entrance. They would pull through the where you see the pretreatment
Yep.
ponds there now and back in. And because of all the cars and congestion, she's training her drivers to come in, turn. It sounds like it would be the off driver who would come in the other route.
Yeah, I think that's really a question of how many different types of drivers that aren't trained yet come in. It's an operational question, right? If it's a distribution center where people are coming from around the country, there's no hoping, you just gotta design for where they're gonna go to. But
Signage will help too.
yeah, if it's a business getting the same deliveries, it's possible.
Do you have any idea how many employees there will be in the new office space between the two operations?
Chris might have a better handle on it. Right now, they're they're all jammed into the one building.
Ah, so
And
these
so
will be moving out of there.
they'll
and
pull by pulling the office staff out of that building, it helps them be much more efficient
Okay,
to have a flow where you have inbound and then the shipping and receiving right now is out of the same, basically the same door. There's not a flow into the, to the production facility.
and how many people does Vida have in the offices wherever they are now?
I believe there are less than 10. And their space, their individual offices, I think, for 8, I believe, is the number.
Inside what's proposed?
Right.
Yeah.
They will have some customers.
Right.
Chris has sat down with each of them and designed, made sure we had sufficient parking and stuff.
The parking is based on one space per 250 square feet. Is that-
I was gonna wait till the staff comment time, and then I was gonna break down the parking for you.
Okay.
I'm happy to do it whenever,
Any other questions at this point?
if you don't mind me doing that.
Okay, go ahead.
So in the staff memo, we had kind of like prompted, like, what's up with the parking with the 2 commercial buildings to the south, to see if you had a calculation that you were married to. But since you don't have one, like, I'll just kind of give you like our calculations. So, I guess, first of all, I would start by saying, if you've got 90 spaces designed out and they work for you, I'd probably stick with 90, and here's why. Because it's a PUD, I think we should be counting the parking for those 2 buildings as well. And, how many bays are in the shop?
3.
But it's not really automotive, right?
So we're using some of the base, because remember you approved a new shop for us, and this business owner approached me about wanting to sell about the time and then the manufacturer hired away one of my staff, so
Is it automotive or more like trucks?
we're doing trucks.
Okay.
Yeah, this isn't cars, but it's trucks are automotive, so
And is it the long building or the square building?
it's a square building.
Okay. Because, so we have these parking calculations in the regulations, of course, and then we're supposed to use those calculations for different uses. So for an auto service bay, it would be 5 vehicles per bay. So if it was 3 bays, that'd be 15 anyway. But then it's kind of questionable if it's an auto service or not.
It's not, then that's,
If it was an auto service, we would classify it as commercial, in which case we'd calculate it as 1 space per 150 square feet, which is what David was asking. So if I kind of measured the size of these 2 structures, and one is 80 by 30, which is 2,400 square feet, so that's 16 spaces for the long one. And the other one is 60 by 50, which is 3,000 square feet, so that's 20 spaces for the square one, or 15 if we called it automotive, but let's just use the bigger number now, 20. So that's 16 plus 20 is 36. Check me, Jason.
are those 2 buildings?
Yeah, I know, which is like, yeah, that seems
That's
like a
out of
lot,
whack, Jen.
considering what you're saying they use.
Yeah.
But that's under the commercial standard versus an office standard.
That's under the commercial standard,
Right.
right? So this is a worst case scenario. So if there was 36 spaces that they had to come up with between those 2, you've already got 12 extra spaces in your parking calculation, because 90 that you're showing minus 78 that you need from the calculation is 12. So you've got 12 extra in your plan now. And you're supposed to provide 36. So that's a difference of 24 spaces. But I think you could easily say that there's 24 spaces south of those 2 buildings in that gravelly area there. And even though you're not developing them as parking now, you could say there's easily 24 spaces, because I was counting these and trying to fit them down in here. You could say that there's 24 spaces like available in the future, and you could do one of your green space waivers for those. And that would make all the math clean in this. And that way, if you wanted to convert those to some other kind of commercial in the future, you've already got the parking. Did that make sense? That was complicated.
There's a much more intelligent and comprehensive version of what I was going to say, which is that I think you should keep the additional parking, because for that very reason, you're parking, you're calculating it at 250. One business is a startup, one's a state. Both those tenants could double or zero in a couple of years, and having the capacity to change the use classification, make this more durable. But I guess counter to what one might expect, I'm not in a big rush to cut your parking and get further impervious.
I know, it feels counterintuitive to me too, because we're always trying
area,
to reduce impervious, yeah.
It's also a good layout.
But likewise, if the two buildings that are there that are pre-existing, somehow they change use, something different happens, I mean, we've got to keep in mind that they too are going to need potential parking. Maybe not, depending on what the use is, but I agree, to the south of that, you know, it's within the boundary of the PUD, so that, you know, that still could be parking there. But yeah, ultimately, I think with the parking that's shown, I think is great.
I think that protects the owner for the future too, because he's already designed stormwater for 90, so.
Absolutely.
What is the parking ratio for the old Sears building? Is that under an industrial classification?
Yeah, it's in
I
our,
think I requested on that.
it's in our submission.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. I just figured the number.
On your narrative?
Yeah.
Industrial.
Pretty sure. We handled that administratively.
Based on the largest shift times 1.25. Yeah.
3 times 1.25.
So it could be a grocery store in the future and you wouldn't have to provide any more parking than that. It's a definite worst case scenario.
Most industrials going to fewer employees, not more. That's.
Oh, I meant the little buildings to the south, I'm sorry.
I see.
You were thinking with the Sears
Yeah,
building.
I just wondered what the third ratio was. You know, we've got the commercial, we've got the office.
Right, because with Tractor Supply, we let them count all their storage area at the smaller ratio. Did you do that with us too? Is there storage area in there?
In the industrial, Jen, or in
the Sears
the?
building, yeah.
Ship and receive.
Yeah.
Might not have helped you at all, but know that you can do that too. You could split a structure up between two different uses to try to make the ratio more reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else from staff at this point? Okay. And the board, anything more? I'll open it up to the public. If there's no public here that will comment, so I'll close the public part of the hearing.
I don't think so.
So. Okay, anything else from the board at this time? Now, for the, just so that we're clear on the parking, we're gonna stay with the 90, is that what, staying with the 90? And that, we're assuming that, the two buildings to the south now have 24 parking places? Is that correct? And I guess that would eliminate being able to cut that, back island greenery back a little bit.
Does that look right, Chris, that 24 could reasonably fit there?
From a general scale, Jen, I think that seems about right.
Yeah. Okay. So it's good to check me.
Isn't there also storage and parking inside these buildings that, you know, so I think you can consider that too, or should.
So that would be a green space waiver?
The green space waiver, as I see it now, would be that one island, if we want to, once they look at it again, I guess, for the truck maneuvering, if it's something that would work better, you know, if you cut maybe one or two parking places off. It won't necessarily make it green if it's going to be traveled by tractor trailer.
And we would
If
need,
you ever need it.
right, and we need to confirm with Otter Creek Engineering just to, because
Sure.
it's the stormwater design
Sure,
that is,
it may affect.
that
Yeah.
it may have a direct impact on.
Dave?
Just a quick question, Chris. I mean, I question whether green space waivers is what the right term. That's all parking anyways on the south side of those buildings, isn't it? So it's already established. I gotta believe you gotta
Currently.
be, you gotta
Gravel?
mostly be
It's all-
considering that as part of your calculations anyways,
Oh,
right?
part of the impervious, you're saying, Dan?
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm not sure green space waiver is necessary. We just establish that there's parking also on the south side of that building that's already there.
Mhm.
Well, I've just commissioned a study by Google Earth, and I concur with your assessment of that area. I find that there is existing parking in that area. I have a question for staff before we move on. Is there a performance standard when we make these public investments of a sidewalk? Is there a performance standard for what connects to them? What a width or a type of sidewalk that if a landowner makes a commitment on connecting to, they can
I
connect.
think it has to meet a certain standard, but, you know,
Okay.
relative to handicap and the 5 foot wide and, I mean, whatever
That's a
standards.
good point. It becomes probably part of your accessible path of travel for state commercial
Yeah.
permitting. That's probably how it happens, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Anything else from the board? Okay,
I have one, just a question to the board. Is there a procedural reason for us to do a deliberative session to hammer out any conditions or wording or? What's your pleasure?
I think we're all set.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I move that the Middlebury Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing on July 22nd, 2019, approve this request for the amended PUD approval for the development of the 6,900 square foot office building located at 383 Exchange Street as presented in the application by Chris Huston and C&P Brick and Mortar LLC, parcel number 021043.100, subject to conditions outlined by the DRB.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
What were the conditions, or,
The conditions will be outlined in the staff memo
By the
decision,
yeah.
right? Yeah, which will just memorialize the discussion that we had here. hopefully.
Correct.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you all.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
That's the biggest one, right? The sidewalk.
Oh, did they really decide to go with the sidewalk?
Well, that's kind of what that was the
Did
one
you hear that
question.
they wanted the sidewalk?
Uh,
I may
that-
have been
I need-
ciphering at that moment.
I needed to ask. I mean, were you guys thinking that the sidewalk connector was an important part of one of the conditions, or?
It's just something that
Be
applicants
nice if it happened, but
said that they want to do. I don't want to commit them to connect to a sidewalk where they don't know where the sidewalk is and
Okay.
such. But it's in the minutes that they intend to
So do
do
we
that.
just wait for that to get picked up in Act 250 and not condition it as part of our approval, or do we?
Seems like there'd be rules on it, like it would be with stormwater.
Yeah, standards for how wide you build it, but the question is, do we require them to build it at all now, or do we wait for Act 250 to ding them on that?
I don't think we condition them to build it.
Okay,
That's up to
sounds
them.
Thank you.
Have fun at Act
My
250.
opinion.
ask what the conditions were.
Well, there'll be a few, but they're pretty minor.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Just standard.
Good night.
Good night, folks.
Other business?
Hearing none.
None?
I move adjournment.
There's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Oh, wait, don't adjourn yet.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. So I want to bring up like a thought as staff, because planners are always thinking, you know? We could update the zoning at some point to require, commercial development like this to donate an easement if we know that there's a future sidewalk coming through that area. This would be like the perfect situation where
Yep.
we would require that. So maybe I'll work with the planning commission on
Okay.
that.
Before we vote, do we have to have a motion to close that hearing?
Oh,
We should have.
Okay.
So,
There's a
Second.
moved and seconded discussion on that motion to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye. One abstain. Okay, where are we? Are we adjourned? All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 We're adjourned. We're all done, Kathy.